ACID got me seeing souls. They hybrids in my eye beams, but I've been living blindly. Gave my soul up for perfect timing. A desert cat reinvented rhyming. How crazy is that?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today this is going to be the very first Legacy of Kain podcast. I don't know if we're going to be doing a whole bunch of these or not. Hopefully we can do one or two at least. Today I have a friend with me. He's a real good guy. His name is Brad Ramsey. He probably knows way more about this than I even do. And Brad, do you want to say hi?
Hi everybody.
What we decided to do is we basically came up with some topics that we wanted to talk about, and we decided that we would go back and forth and just kind of share our own opinions on what the answers to these questions might have been, because there are a lot of unanswered questions in the Legacy of Kain timeline. We're going to just go ahead and jump right into this. First thing that we're going to talk about, I think, let's go with, how about Mobius's staff? Do you have anything you want to say about the staff, Brad Ramsey?
I always found it curious how the staff works on Kain, vampires in general, and for some reason it works on the Soul Reaver when Raziel has it, but technically the Reaver is not a vampire. I always thought that was kind of confusing.
It is more of a wraith, isn't it? Yeah, you would assume that it'd be more of a wraith, but it did disable the Soul Reaver in Soul Reaver 2, I believe, actually, now that you mention it.
Yep.
I think that could have something to do with the timelines, and I could be way off base here, but I think that could be that by the point Raziel had the Soul Reaver in Soul Reaver 2, there was already vampiric souls within the Soul Reaver itself, because Raziel had defeated and absorbed the other vampire lieutenants. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe that was what was going on there. Is the simple fact that, there was already so many vampiric souls in there, and that's how it was able to be nullified by Mobius's staff. One thing I always found...
That's true. I never even thought about that.
Yeah. One thing I always thought was kind of weird about it is, so this part is kind of vague to me. I have heard people say that Mobius has been confirmed to be a vampire himself, but I don't really know of any source that I've actually read that. Now, I have seen things about how Mobius was actually raised by vampires, but I've never actually seen something that confirmed that he was actually a vampire himself. So I don't know if that would really make any sense for it to actually work on him, unless he really was a vampire. So I guess it just depends on where you're looking for your information on that one.
In the lore, now, when you become a guardian, a pillar guardian, you get granted long life. Am I mistaken?
So no, you're not mistaken. That is part of it. It is, but when Mobius was being raised, back at that time, what they would do is they would actually turn the Guardians into vampires. And so, and that's why Mobius was being raised by vampires, because they knew that he was one of the Pillar Guardians. So eventually he was supposed to become a vampire. I just don't know if he ever actually became a vampire. You know what I mean?
Right. I think that's why he started the uprising, because he didn't want to be turned into a vampire.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right.
Yeah.
And I think especially with Mobius in particular, the whole Guardian thing, I'm pretty sure that the Guardian of Time, he always ends up living longer than the other Guardians, simply because he is the Pillar of Time. You know what I mean? I've always assumed that you probably ended up getting a very long life by being a Guardian of Time. One thing I've always wondered, though, now that we're talking about Guardian of Time, is he wasn't the first Guardian of Time, so I've always thought it was kind of strange that none of the other Guardians came back and played any role within the timeline, within the story, because theoretically, one of the older Guardians of Time could have easily just showed up some point in the timeline to warn everybody about what Mobius was doing, but it never happened.
Right. Unless he was the first human Time Guardian after the original vampire died.
Oh yeah, man, you're right. That actually does make a whole lot of sense. But let's move on to the next topic. Oh, here's a good one in our list is, was Ariel really good? What are your opinions on that?
At least in Blood Omen and Soul Reaver, I don't think she was, because she was still corrupt, because they showed her with the, half-rotten face or whatever. She's kind of played more of a villain that was just trying to get them to do things for her, in my opinion.
I completely agree with you, actually. Yeah.
It wasn't until I think Defiance, when she actually was more of a portrayed as a good person. She was more pure.
Definitely, especially considering the fact that Dennis Dyack wanted to make all of these people in the story, you know, shades of gray and not really either an actual bad guy or an actual good guy. Especially with Ariel. I remember I was talking in my other video about her in particular, but like, you know, when the good guy of the story is telling you to go around and kill a bunch of people, you know, who's really good, right?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I've always felt the same way about that. I've never really considered her to be like super good. I'm not saying she's super evil or anything like that. I just don't buy into this whole thing about her being some like, you know, angelic being, you know, that's trying to save the world. Maybe she thought she was in her own little way, but I really do think that she was kind of misguided in her quest, and she was, you know, just kind of being a specter who was tied to the mortal realm, instead of, you know, letting it go and actually passing on to the other side.
I agree.
And especially like when you get to, I think it was Soul Reaver 2, it might have been Defiance, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when Raziel runs into her at the pillars, and I love the conversation they have where he's like, hey, what if I told you that by Kain, you know, basically condemning the world, that we actually ended up with a better fate than we would have had if Kanan actually sacrificed himself.
Yeah, I think that was Defiance when they were way back in the past.
I think it was too. I'm just not
right when she died.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Defiance. Like I said, I'm just not 100% on it, but I think you're right. I think that was when he got, no, because that was when he went into the future. I think it was when Raziel went, and he was like a decade in the past before the whole events of Blood Omen took place. I think that's when that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember at one point he went back around that time frame.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about Ariel while we're on the topic of her?
The only thing is, you know, she was at the end of Defiance when she gave herself to Raziel to give the final baptism of the blade. You know, that was a true, you know, heroic thing to do. Kind of like Raziel did.
Yeah, you're super right, actually.
So she, you know, like that was like the point that's like, that was her purpose as Balance Guardian, is to try to bring balance to the pillars in general. It took a long time.
But she did it. You're right.
But she did it.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but you're definitely right. You know, she was definitely able to actually fulfill her purpose as Balance Guardian by doing that. So, all right, let's go on to the next one. This is one I really want to talk about, and I actually really am interested in someone else's opinion about this one. Is what is the Elder God? Like, what is he really?
That is a big question.
I know.
You know, I think you said in one of your videos that he may be an old vampire that went back in the past or whatever. Or it might have been something else I watched on it. But I think either he is because he feeds on souls, so he was either a fallen vampire that maybe either from the future that got taken back to the past, or he was one of the original vampires that took their life and then he found a way to live. And that's why he grows so much throughout the games, throughout time, because he's feeding so much, getting stronger and stronger. Or he's you have the spectral realm, let's say human realm, and then you have the demon dimension. Maybe he is some being from a different dimension. That's
a good point. Yeah, I never even considered that like he could possibly be like something that came over from, that bled into Nosgoth through the pillars or through the gates. You know, he could definitely be something that came from a different dimension. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there is time travel in this series, so nothing is really impossible. I've always felt like he was some kind of vampire, and I could be wrong, but or maybe a Hilden. I mean, you know, like you were saying, it's kind of a big question. But I just don't believe he's a god of any kind. You know?
No.
Yeah. I legitimately do not think he is actually a god of any kind, period. I think he's manipulating all of these events simply because he wants to feed, and it's because he wants to feed so much. That's the reason why I feel like he's got to be some kind of vampire. And I definitely do not think he is actually the still center of the wheel, you know, like he's always saying. I think he's literally, like Raziel was saying, just a parasitic organism on the wheel of life, and he happens to be consuming those souls. And it would actually be bad for him for the world to end, or for vampires to take over, because he would end up dying because he wouldn't have anything to eat, which is why I think that he actually wants to get rid of the vampires is because, if everyone in the world is a vampire, he would have no more souls to eat.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
And that's kind of why I've always assumed, I guess, that he was some kind of vampire. Now, the reason why I think he might be a Hilden, and again, this could be wrong, is the Hildens, right? Like, they are like vampires who refuse to go back to the wheel. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is what, like, maybe he's an ancient Hilden and he eventually turned into what he is by going to the wheel but not actually going to the wheel, you know what I mean? Like actually living off of the wheel as opposed to actually letting his soul go back into the wheel.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah.
They do have some similarities, the Hilden and the ancient vampires.
Yeah, I definitely think there could be something there, but like, how about this one? So when Raziel was thrown into the abyss, do you think he resurrected Raziel, or do you think he just happened to be there? I'd be curious about your opinion on that.
I think he was just there.
Me too.
He knew maybe through Mobius, he knew that he was going to end there, that he was going to fall there, and he knew he could use them to try to kill Kain and the rest of the vampires. Yeah. So he made up this whole story, and who knows how long he could have known that. He could have had millenniums to think of a plan and think of what he was going to say and how to manipulate him.
Yeah, and to have millennia to be able to come up with a plan, you'd have to be pretty stupid to not be able to come up with at least a decent plan.
Right.
Yeah, but I agree with you, though. In fact, I think that he couldn't actually absorb Raziel's soul, because I think it would have created like a time paradox that would have just destroyed everything in existence if he had actually done that. And I think that's the reason why he didn't consume him when he went there, was because he knew that he literally could not consume him without putting his own existence into jeopardy.
Right. And if he could even consume a vampire soul in general, because all the wraiths in the spectral realm, those are all, we find out those are all vampire souls. So if he's trying to feed on souls, why wouldn't he feed on, I would assume that a vampire soul would be a stronger soul. Why wouldn't he want to feed on them unless he couldn't?
That actually makes a lot of sense. I never really thought of it like that, but that actually does make a lot of sense. And it would also make sense as to why he wants Raziel so badly.
Right, because he's a stupidly strong soul.
And he can actually absorb the souls of the vampires, whereas the Elder God couldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah, that actually makes a hell of a lot of sense, man. That's definitely a good point. So here, just let me take a look at the list here. Alright, here, this is a good topic. At the beginning of Soul Reaver, when Kain actually casts Raziel out, do you think that he really did that out some jealous whim, or do you think that he knew that he needed to do this because it was the only way for him to basically introduce a pawn, his own pawn, right, to the game?
Right. I think, when you play the first game, you think, even the way they show him, he's like, oh, he's mad at him, the way they make his face look and all that. And when you play all the rest of the games and you go back to that opening scene, you look at his face and you kind of think like, man, he might show remorse for doing it. And I think because he stumbled into Mobius's time chamber, however long before that point, he already knew about Raziel and all that stuff, and he, it wasn't cemented in his mind until Raziel came back, and when he struck him with the Soul Reaver and it shattered. That was when it cemented in his head that, okay, all those were true.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That does make sense too, yeah. I personally think that Kain spent a lot of time at the Chronoplast chambers after, Mobius's death in Blood Omen, and I think Kain knows more than pretty much anybody aside from Mobius as to what was going to happen. Now, I gotta be honest with you. I want to believe that Kain felt remorse about doing it, and for the longest time, I actually would watch that cutscene and I could have sworn to God that it looked like Kain was feeling like, bad about what he did when they threw Raziel into the abyss. But the more I watch that video, the more I look at his eyes, I don't know. I just don't feel like it's really in Kain's character to really give a fuck. Like, as messed up as that sounds. Yeah.
True.
You know, I mean, I just don't feel like it's, if anything, I feel like he's like in deep thought when that part happened. Like he was like, okay, what do I got to do next? You know, this is really Raziel. I think the whole thing about him looking surprised when he saw Raziel's wings was that he probably saw visions in the chronoplast chambers of a vampire with wings, but maybe he didn't know exactly who it was going to be. Now, I know that sounds stupid, you know, as I say it, but maybe he didn't necessarily think that the chronoplast chambers were like they're going to happen no matter what kind of thing. Maybe he thought like all of that could change, and yada yada. You know, he look at ways to find and change the future. But then once he saw Raziel with his wings, it kind of clicked in his head. He was like, oh shit, like this is actually happening. So I need to get rid of him now, or I need to cast him in the abyss now, because this is actually a thing that's actually happening. But
yeah, that I can see that. And going back to him not giving a crap, is he does seem like he didn't care about his other lieutenants when Raziel was going to kill him.
Yeah, for real.
But it does seem, at least in the later games, not in Soul Reaver, but starting in Soul Reaver 2, it does seem like he actually cares about Raziel. Not just because he's trying to use him to save Nosgoth, but you know, he does, maybe he feels like he's a son to him or something.
I can understand why you would think that, and again, that's one of those things where it's like, I mean, by the end of the series, by Defiance, he does seem kind of more like a changed person. So to be fair, yeah, you know, I could totally understand why you would think that, and I want to believe that. But the thing is Kain has always been very, very selfish, right? No matter how he, like, you know, tries to justify his actions, he's always been a very, very selfish character. So if Kain already knew, right, if you already seen these visions in the chronoplast chambers, then what could have been happening there was he knew that Raziel had to willingly sacrifice himself so that Kain could actually do what he needed to do, which was attempt to kill the Elder God. And if he had seen everything else, he could have seen this moment too, where he knew, right, that, okay, if Raziel doesn't willingly sacrifice himself, then there's no way for us to actually win. And so I've always felt like he was kind of just nudging Raziel in the right direction, you know, so then that way he could win, because if he didn't do that, right, then it wouldn't happen. Do you see what I'm saying? I know it's kind of confusing, but
yeah, I do. I do see what you're saying.
But then again, at the same time, at the end of Defiance, when he's sitting there looking over like looking over the ruins, and he's talking about hope, it does kind of seem like. But you know what though? Now that I think about it, now that we're actually discussing this, he ended up becoming cleansed, right? The corruption was taken from his body at the end of Defiance because of the whole baptism of the Reaver. So it actually does make sense that he would be more of a good person, right? By the end of Defiance, as compared to the rest of the series, because all the corruption has been removed from him.
Right.
Okay, so let's move on. Here's a good one, actually, and you might be able to help me with this one, but let's talk about Mobius's death, because you know how he has like 2 deaths?
Yes.
Yeah, like he gets his head cut off, and then in Defiance, he ends up being killed by Raziel. Maybe you can help me with this. Like, why do you think that happened? Like, how do you think it was changed? Because I don't really get why maybe it was changed like that.
Well, when Kain killed him, when he decapitated him, that was what, 30 plus years after the final moments of Defiance. So technically Mobius died before Mobius died. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. When Raziel sucked him into the sword.
Oh, you're right.
Into the Reaver.
Yeah.
That was right before the pillars exploded. So was. I guess it was basically the same time.
No, you're actually correct. Yeah.
Because he kills Mobius in Blood Omen. Kain kills Mobius. And then he goes to the pillars. He fights Mortanius, and then he makes his choice. So the pillars don't explode until, you know, right there at the end of Defiance. So it's kind of.
No, I see what
it
you're
is
saying.
Confusing.
No, actually, I see what you're saying. That makes perfect sense, because they traveled back into the past to a time when Mobius wasn't dead yet.
If you remember, when Mobius was talking to, I believe it was Raziel, it was Kain. When Kain killed him, when he was down in the pit where the final baptism of the blade happens, he's like, he'll just bring me back to life. that was Mobius was telling Kain that he'll just bring him back to life.
Yeah.
So did that happen after Kain cut his head off? And then he brought him back to life, and then he went down there to talk to him and say, hey, we got a problem. And then Kain, the older Kain, showed up and killed him again.
Wow. Bro, that is some insight right there. That'd be crazy actually. Yeah.
Time travel's a bitch.
That. Yeah, seriously. Seriously, that would just like connect everything and put it into like a big circle pretty much. If so, Kain cuts off Mobius's head, the Elder God basically revives him, and then he goes to go talk to the Elder God, and then that's when we see the whole scene with Raziel actually killing him. Wow, man, yeah, that makes a hell of a lot of sense actually. That's a good one.
Right, and after Kain kills him, then Raziel sucks him into the Reaver. So technically, he's feeding him to the Elder God or to the Wheel, whatever, however that works. But Mobius, I don't think after that point, I don't think Mobius could be brought back to life if the Elder God was capable of that.
Right. No, you're right. Yeah, he wouldn't be able to be brought back. I don't know. I don't know.
Right. There's a lot of questions.
Definitely. But since we're talking about Mobius and the Chronoplast time chambers, here I have a question for you. I have a question to pose to you. Do you think that somehow maybe Mobius was able to manipulate the Chronoplast time chambers to the point where even after his death, like it would only show Kain certain visions? Because I mean, we all know Mobius's planning was very meticulous. Do you think it's possible that he could have somehow rigged it basically so that Kain would only see the visions that he wanted him to see?
Yeah, it's possible. They don't really explain how the Chronoplast chambers work. If it's just magic, if there's some kind of technology. It can. And I've never heard or remember hearing anything about Mobius being able to manipulate them, but it's possible that he could have locked him in when he saw certain events. He saw certain things play out, and he wanted Kain to do those things, so he could have locked them so they couldn't change with time. When certain events happened or different events happened a different way than he saw it the first time, he could have locked it the first way so that way it wouldn't change, so that way Kain would still play out the way that they wanted it to.
Now, the only reason I even question it is because Mobius was basically like, what would be the word? I don't want to say wizard, but I think you understand. A sorcerer, right? He was basically a sorcerer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And although Kain does dabble in like some magical spells, like which we see in Blood Omen, I don't necessarily think that Kain would really have the exact the amount of competency in sorcery that Mobius would have. So I would not be surprised if somehow basically Mobius was able to actually like not alter the visions, but kind of like what you're saying is lock certain visions into place, that certain ones that he wanted Kain to see. And I don't think Kain would necessarily, at least not at first, right? I don't think he would necessarily have the ability or really the skills to number one, even realize there was something going on with the Chronoplast time chambers, or number two, to do anything about it.
Right. I mean, you don't see him have any kind of. Well, I mean, the first time they really show it is at the end of Soul Reaver when he's just setting. He figured out how to set the portals to where he wanted to go. But other than that, yeah, they never really showed anything, and he never said anything about having any kind of mastery over the portal or the time chambers.
I don't know. That's just one unanswered question I've always really had. Why was this one's one of yours? It's why was there one original Hilden woman in Blood Omen 2? Can you explain that one to me?
Right. When they first, after playing Soul Reaver 2, you hear about, he says the Hilden, and then you start playing this and you get this one, and she kind of looks like a vampire. She acts like a vampire. Like, she uses the terminology that vampires use, here's take my life's blood and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And that she's the only pure Hilden that you ever see in any of the games besides, in the murals. And you have the Hilden Lord outside, which he came from the demon dimension. He crossed over from the demon dimension, but she didn't get sucked in with the rest of the Hilden. So
True.
it begs the question, is there actually more Hilden that are, maybe she didn't get sucked in because she was on the side of the vampires, and they gave her some kind of pass, like, okay, you're fine, you're not gonna go to the demon dimension.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, wow, that makes a lot of sense. So, like, yeah, could there be other Hilden out there? Could that possibly be why the Elder God was telling Raziel that he's a Hilden, even though he was, like, born as a human? Could there have been other Hilden who weren't sucked into the demon dimension? And maybe, like, Raziel has some, like, distant relative or something like that who was actually Hilden, and that's why the Elder God was telling him, hey, you're actually a Hilden. It's to the Hilden race that you belong, which is something that the Elder God actually told Raziel. And, it's always basically depicted as him being the Hilden champion. But I remember I brought that up in one of my videos too, is I never really understood why he would say that when he was born a human, but after hearing what you just said, it makes me think that, it's very well possible that there could have been other Hilden out there, and that Raziel just happened to be basically a distant relative of one of those Hildens who survived. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's weird why that's the only game that they show a Hilden in, besides, Hilden Lord and the other bad ones, I guess. Yeah, that whole, besides Raziel, his Reaver being similar to the mural of the Hilden champion with the flaming Reaver, or the flaming sword. That's really the only resemblance that I saw from Raziel to the Hilden champion. So yeah, having a distant relative makes sense.
I've always believed that, especially when I just, started doing research for the timeline thing. One thing I found was interesting there was they were talking about how the Hilden are actually just vampires who refuse to go back to the wheel. That has always been what I assumed is why what Raziel was considered to be a Hilden was because he went to the wheel. He died, right, as a vampire, but he didn't end up going back to the wheel. So technically, air quotes, technically, he's a Hilden then, because he refused to submit to the wheel of life. But then again, now that we're talking about this and I'm thinking about it again, I guess that kind of doesn't really make sense, because then in theory, I can't pronounce this one, the slaw, right? Like, then technically they would be Hildens too, because they didn't go to the wheel. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess it would make more sense for it to be that Raziel actually had a relative who was a Hilden at one point. Maybe the blood gift, like the blood curse, isn't like passed down from generation to generation, So
yeah, maybe.
So all right, let's go another one. The similarities. How about the similarities between the Hilden and the rest of Kain's vampire lieutenants? That's another one of yours. You want to explain that one too?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So in Soul Reaver 2 and Blood Omen, you have you have a few of the Hildens that have devolved, I'll say, from their kind of angelic look from the past to they have what are I think they're blue, kind of bluish ones with the big long forky hands with they kind of channel electricity through them, and then you have the big Goliath ones that shoot fire, and you have a little step up above that, the ones that have just like them but they have spikes on them, like coming out their back and protruding out their heads, and that actually resembles the one that Mortanius turns into in Blood Omen, which that one reminds me of Duma, and Zephon reminds me of...
Oh, that's true, huh?
Zephon, he reminds me of the spider one from Blood Omen 2. The ones that when you're going in between, I think it's in between cities, like where you're kind of by the bridge, and they got nests, people spider webbed up, and they capture travelers in like spider webs and stuff. So then same thing Zephon's children do. They kind of resemble them, but Zephon more resembles them, more of a spider. And Zephon even has 2 protrusions on his back that resemble an original Hilden's, like where they would supposed to have wings, maybe.
Yeah.
Off their back. So I mean, there's one of the other ones. Malchiah resembles the little worm guys. Well, they're kind of big, but the worm-like creatures in Soul Reaver 2 when you're in the swamp.
Yeah, they definitely do. I think this kind of harkens back to what I was talking about with the whole, Hildens are actually just vampires who refuse to submit to the wheel. If anything, it could be that by the time that Raziel is resurrected, the other vampires, right, like they've been around for so long that not only have they started to mutate, some of them, I believe, have actually already died and have actually come back from the wheel. For example, I'm trying to remember his name. I want to say it's Melchiah, but I could be wrong. So you can feel free to correct me if you want. But I remember, the one that got like smushed, basically ground into mincemeat inside of that.
Melchiah.
That was Melchiah? Okay, perfect.
That was Melchiah.
Yeah. So he had the ability to like switch in and out of the spectral realm and the material realm. Remember that? And that's how.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's vague, but I'm not sure if he actually switches to the spectral realm or if he just, like, as he's going through the barriers, that his body actually just kind of phases out into the spectral realm as he's just where he's passing through.
Yeah.
Because if you watch in the game, if you watch him go through it in the game, he's kind of solid, and then you see like a line when he's passing through it. Right. But when he comes out the other side, he's still solid. It's just like when he's passing through, that part of his body switches into the spectral realm. And that could have to do with him basically not really being alive because he's rotting. He's stuck in between the two realms.
He's basically like he's found a way to harness the power or like the life energy of the spectral realm, and that's how he's like able to fuse through these things. But again, it kind of just begs the question of how was he able to do that? And I think he was able to do that because he was alive for so long that he basically figured out, hey, there is a spectral realm. Because they don't all know there's a spectral realm at first, right? Like, I mean, they just kind of learn about it. Like, even Raziel, when he was resurrected, was kind of like, what is this? Like, what kind of blasphemy is this? Like, and it's because most of them don't really realize that it's even going on. And it's even been, like, hinted at in interviews that basically Melchiah, he had literally just learned how to do that right before Kain killed him. Personally, I think Melchiah wanted to die. I legitimately think that he wanted to die. And I think maybe him knowing of the existence of the spectral realm had something to do with that, of why he wanted.
That's a good point. And even in his dialogue with Raziel, you kind of get that feeling. So just in one part of when he's talking to him, I can't remember exactly what he says, but it makes it sound like that he's sick of this piecing himself together and all this other stuff, that he just wants it over with, and he knows that the other vampires won't do it,
or maybe they can't do it,
right? Or they can't do it. But so he's like, he sees Raziel and he's like, oh, there's my opportunity.
Yeah, because he actually sees that Raziel, could actually basically eat his soul, and he wouldn't have to go to the spectral realm. He would literally just go back to the wheel. Which is what the ancient vampires wanted, was to go to the wheel and be reborn. And I remember like right when you kill him, he's like, "Oh, I'm released," right? And he just stands there while that big, grinder comes down on him. It's not like, he can phase through things. So think about this: he could have phased through that, right? But he did.
Right.
And not only him, but the one that swims in water, is that Duma? Or is that Rahab? I think that might be Rahab. I think he wanted to die too. I really think he wanted to die too. Kain basically told him, hey, sacrifice yourself so that Raziel can get stronger. Because then when Raziel runs into him in Soul Reaver 1, he's just like, oh yeah, Kain told me that you would come here. And then Raziel's like, well, what did he say would happen? And so Kain said that you would destroy me. And he just let himself get destroyed.
Right.
I think pretty much all of them wanted to die aside from Duma. That's the only one that I think actually probably wanted to live.
Right, yeah, well, Duma or, in the Defiance, Terrell didn't seem like he wanted to die.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right. I forget about Terrell because of the whole...
I know.
Yeah, the whole time travel shenanigans that happened there.
Yeah.
That shit was crazy. Do we want to talk about Terrell since we're on the subject with him? Do you have anything you want to say about Terrell?
Yeah, we can talk about Terrell. It's funny, I can remember playing Blood Omen in the catacombs underneath Avernus when you find a book and it has his name in it. Well, Hashagik.
Holy shit, you're right.
And you read it and it says Hashagik, I can't remember exactly what it says, something Hashagik. You never hear it any other time, ever. And then, and then you get to Defiance, and then they're saying it, and he's like, what is this? They're chanting to somebody, and then, whoever shocks Raziel, you never find that out, and he falls down into the pit, and turns out it's Terrell, which that was a shocker to me.
No, I never even thought about that. That's some like deep continuity right there.
Right, and that goes back to I know that they had lots of problems with who's making this game, I'm doing this, all that stuff, but was that planned the whole time? You have to believe the way that these games all play out, that some of this stuff had to be planned out from the beginning, at least kind of generally planned out, like they were going to do something, and when the games changed hands, or the production of them or whatever changed hands, that they maybe went a different way than was planned to begin with. But some of those things really go from the first game all the way to the last game.
I think they probably had like at least a rough draft outline where they wanted the story to go, and like Dennis Dyack, if you're actually listening to this, please let us know in the comments, because that would be cool to know. But I actually would agree with you there. I think maybe, if nothing else, maybe they at least had the Terrell thing worked out, about him, going back into the past, being brought into the past by, I think it was the Guardian of Dimensions in Blood Omen 1. I can't remember her name right now. Maybe you will, but I'm pretty sure they probably at least knew that, or they at least had like basic plot outlines. Now, what I'm really interested in is where the story was gonna go after that, in terms of Kain, right? Like if there actually was a Legacy of Kain 6. I've always wondered like what would have happened there. Like, do you have any opinions on what you think may have happened if there actually was a Blood Omen 6 or Legacy of Kain 6?
I do.
Cool. I want. I
do.
I'm interested.
Okay, so he gets the sword, and you're basically at the end of Defiance. You're basically right back where you were at the beginning of Blood Omen. It went full circle and didn't go anywhere.
You're right.
They changed a few things, like the timeline got changed a little bit where the Hilden were able to come through, but Kain squashed that, and that's basically the only big thing that happened, and it didn't go anywhere. And
True.
So the only thing that he could do, in my opinion, what they would do, or would have to do if they make a new game, would be Kain would have to go into the past, back when the pillars were being constructed.
Hey, real quick.
Or before.
Real quick.
Okay.
It's funny you say that, because I swear to God, I've been thinking about this lately, and that's exactly what I was gonna say too. Is that the story, like, pretty much, it needed to go back further into the past for it to continue. But you can go ahead, but I actually agree with you there. I think he would have went back into the past as well.
Right. Okay, so he would have to go into the past, at least to when the pillars were being built.
Yeah.
They basically, when they built the pillars, it was all good, vampires are being born and all this. And then after they get cursed, well, that's kind of like I don't want to say double jeopardy, but basically you do this, you're screwed.
Yeah.
You do this, you're screwed. The world is.
Right.
You need the vampires for the pillars to thrive, and then if you don't have the vampires, they don't thrive. They die. But if you keep the vampires, the world dies. It's so he would have to go back and somehow change it. He would probably talk to Janos Audrin or whoever, and whoever else was, doing the spells for the pillars and constructing them.
Right.
And he talked to them and say, hey, don't do that, or you need to change it so that way if you're going to banish the Hilden, the pillars need to be able to be more sufficient with having human guardians, or something. He would have to do something like that, or he would have to try to, it's not in Kain's character, but to broker some kind of a peace between the two, so that way they didn't have to use the pillars.
That makes sense too. That definitely does make sense. I could see them having to do something like that. One thing that I think probably would definitely have been touched upon, especially if they did that, is I think we would have ended up finding out who the Elder God actually is. And I think that it would have ended up turning out that, like I was saying earlier, that maybe the Elden God was one of the Hilden or something like that, and maybe that could have been like one of the little plot twists that could have been in the 6th game, is maybe like when he goes back into the past, one of the people, that's helping him, or maybe one of the enemies, we end up finding out that is actually the guy who ends up becoming the Elder God, and then Kain would actually fight him as opposed to fighting the giant, monster Elder God that we all know. Is he could have easily, especially if he wasn't, the Elder God, if the Elder God wasn't like a giant monstrosity the whole time, he could have been like, that could have been like the last boss, right? As he ends up fighting the guy who would have ended up becoming the Elder God.
Right. And you just said that, and it made me think that you remember in Blood Omen 2 when they had the machine, and Kain, it was some kind of creature that all you had to do was, I think it was feed it the blood of the race you wanted to kill, and it would think about him and it would kill him, or however that worked.
Mm-hmm.
What if the pillars, kind of the basic principles, that they used a Hilden at the base of the pillars, at the center of the pillars.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
To say that this is the race that we want to banish. This is this is who we want to banish. Use that genetic makeup. That's who's getting banished. And that Hilden that they used was turned into the Elder God, and he kind of spread out through time.
But like,
because
it's kind of a ritual or something.
Right.
Yeah.
If you notice, it doesn't matter where they go in time. The Elder God knows them, and it's just like, it's a continuing conversation. It's not like he's he just knows the future and he's talking to him. It's like he's actually lived the whole thing. So that when the Elder God that the vampires worship is actually a person that they sacrificed, but he just gets spread out through time, forward and backward.
And that does make a lot of sense, because no matter what time period they're in, the Elder God already knows them, right? And he always, right. And you're right, like there is like one concise story, like one conversation. If you were to take all the lines in all the games that include the Elder God, you could actually arrange them in a way to make it one conversation, even though they exist in separate timelines.
Right.
Or times. I shouldn't say timelines, because there's no timelines, but you know what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I definitely think that it would have had to go back into the past, and I don't want to say that, I feel like it'd be cliche, right, if Kain just ends up killing that thing and then ends up sacrificing himself finally, right, and that'd be the end of the story. But I do feel like it would kind of make sense if because all of these air quotes here issues started when Kain refused to sacrifice himself. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the way they end the story, is Kain eventually, he finally does sacrifice himself, and maybe we will even see a cameo from Raziel, but a Raziel that is different than the one we all knew, because Raziel had sacrificed himself, and then now maybe at the end of 6, what happened is we'd see, like a happy Raziel, right? Like one who wasn't a warrior because there wasn't a war to fight, like one where, it's like just Raziel with a family and actually had a nice peaceful life. Like maybe Kain would have seen that in a vision or something like that, and so if I was going to guess, I would guess that it would end like that. Personally, I'd prefer if it ended, but maybe it's just because I'm, I guess, twisted, or when it comes to these games. But I'd rather it end in not like the Elder God winning, but in a way that I feel like would be more, I guess, fitting for the Legacy of Kain series. I could totally see it being something where Kain doesn't sacrifice himself and he becomes the Elder God, you know what I mean, or some crazy shit like that.
Yeah.
But I definitely could see them actually making it so that he could, he would sacrifice himself. So
in one way or another.
Right. So let's do one more. Let's talk about, how that video came out, or there was rumors. Okay, so there was rumors about them making a remake of Blood Omen. It's actually going, it supposedly is being worked on by Blueprint Studios. Those are the guys that made like Uncharted. There's like a Uncharted Ethan something or something like that. I don't know. Someone can correct me in the comments, but I guess they're like a well-known studio. And this report was back in May though, so I don't know if they're still really working on it, and nothing was ever confirmed. But the rumor is they're actually going to remake starting from Blood Omen, which I like. What do you feel about that? Like, do you think they should start at Blood Omen, or do you feel more like what it seems like a lot of people feel like, where that they should start at Soul Reaver?
No, if they're gonna do it, they need to do it all the way.
I agree.
You know, I mean, those two games are classic games. As a matter of fact, I will send you a picture. I have all 5 of them sitting up on my dresser, stacked up against the wall, lined up, all original games.
Me too.
But I found them today. Well, I've been playing them. I haven't played in a while, but I've been playing them, and I was organizing stuff because I moved, so I'm organizing stuff. And I found them, like, you know what? I'm putting these up on the dresser, and I'm taking a picture of them.
Sweet.
Anyway, so if they're gonna do it, they need to go all the way. They need to start. I mean, they're doing it with Resident Evil, and it's a hit for the most part, even though a lot of people don't really like the way they took some of them, but it would be a great boost for the series if they started fresh and just remade them, in my opinion, because Legacy of Kain is a great game. I'm not fond of the top-down view, just because you're so far away, and
No, I agree.
Even if they did it that way, I personally would be amazing if they kept it that way. But better graphics and be able to zoom in.
Oh, definitely. And like, I'm not trying to cut you off or anything, but I'm pretty sure I know where you're going with this. Like, 'cause I don't know about you, but personally, like, I really think that Blood Omen is the perfect game to remake nowadays, especially if you make it like an open world kind of game. I think it's perfect, right? Blood Omen in particular would be perfect to be remade as an open world game. I mean, it already pretty much has everything that you need to make a successful open world game. It has its own world, it has the whole spell system, that you can collect different armors, you can get different kinds of weapons. It's just perfect. And why they're not doing it already just blows my mind. It's like they're just letting money sit on the table. Like, they really should just redo it, and hopefully they do someday. I know there's a lot of us out there, right? There's a lot of us that actually love these games and would love to see them come back as remakes, especially with the better graphics and all that. But yeah. Hey everybody, so this is Future Vic Boss. This is me while I'm editing the video. That is where we ended our conversation for that day. We are going to make a second episode because there are a whole lot of things that we didn't touch upon that we actually wanted to talk about. So please look forward to that. If you guys liked this video, please like, please comment, and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Also, shout out Brad Ramsey. So you guys go subscribe to Brad Ramsey's too. The guy's awesome. He knows a lot about Legacy of Kain, so definitely go check him out. Oh, one last thing before I forget. I know there's probably not a whole bunch of people that are like waiting with bated breath for the next episode in the retrospective series, but I did just finish the script. I've already finished my playthrough for Soul Reaver 2, and so I'm working on that video as we speak, so just give me a little bit more time. It is coming out. It's going to be hella long because Soul Reaver 2 storyline is almost 2 hours long at least, so even that section alone is going to make like a 2-hour long video. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that. And again, thank everybody for being here. If you made it this far in the video, you're a beast. And everybody take it easy, and peace.